So in this video, we're going to list and define the steps in the business buying decision process. So recall in the earlier video, we talked about the consumer buying decision process. Now we'll turn our attention to the business buying process. So in the case of the business buying process, decision process by which business buyers determine which product and services their organization need to purchase. So compared to the consumer buying decision itself, the business buying process itself is actually much more complex. You have more stages involved. But the stages itself starts with in terms of pretty similar in terms of a problem recognition. This is then look in terms of the general need description, followed by the product specification, a search for the supplier, product in terms of proposal solicitation, supplier selection, order routine specification, as well as finally in terms of a performance review. So in the next slide, we'll run through in terms of each of them and explain. Starting in terms of problem recognition. This is where in terms of someone in the company recognizes a problem or need that can be met by acquiring a good or services. So recall in our previous video, we talked about the 5 or the 6 in terms of the buying center. And in the case of the buying center itself, we have the initiator who will be at the one providing in terms of the problem recognition. And on this itself, the next step is looking at the general need description. After recognizing the need, we then look at in terms of a buyer describing what is the quantity and characteristics of the product that the company needs. And this goes into deeper in terms of the product specification, where the buying organization decides on and specify the best technical product characteristics for a needed item. So in the case of general need description itself, for instance, we know that the problem over here is that there's a lack of in terms of PCs in the organization, and in terms of the general need description is that we need to buy more PCs. However, it's only at the product specification then we start to decide what is the type of PC that we need, what is the RAM, what is the size of the, perhaps is it a laptop or is it in terms of a standalone console. We need to decide on that, and from there we then look at the supply search. We try to find the best vendor that can provide us in terms of this set of PCs. Following which we have what we know as a proposal solicitation. In this proposal solicitation is often known as a request for proposal. The buying organization itself will invite qualified suppliers to submit proposal, and from there itself, once they complete in terms of the RFP, in terms of the request for proposal, you then come into terms of what we know as the supplier selection itself. This is where in terms of the buyer reviews the proposal and select a supplier or suppliers depending in terms of how the RFP is actually being formed. Lastly, next we have look at in terms of the order routine specification. This is where in terms of finally the buyer writes the final order with the chosen supplier listing the technical specification and other requirements. Essentially, this is the part whereby we carry out in terms of the buying from the organization, from the vendor. And we don't stop there. There's the 8th step, and this is what we know as a performance review. In the company itself, that needs to in terms of look at how well is the vendor doing. So the buyer will assess the performance of the supplier and decide whether they want to continue with the vendor, or perhaps they want to modify the purchases that's made, or even drop the arrangement so that they can actually look at other suppliers that can deliver to their expectation. So on this itself, we have the business buying decision process coming from recognizing a problem, to have a general need description, a more detail in terms of a product specification, looking for suppliers that can meet the requirements, and asking in terms of proposals from qualified suppliers, selecting the supplier that submitted the proposal, and from there make a decision and provide the ordering. And on that itself, after the performance is delivered, to review the performance and see whether they want to continue with the vendor. So with that itself, we have listed and defined the steps in the business buying process. I see you in the next video.